those phones that is just so timeless in so many different ways. It's not necessarily like the greatest phone ever made, but for this manufacturer, OnePlus specifically, I honestly think it was one of the biggest shifts that they've done. And I think at the end of the day, this phone is still completely worth it. And it may even be more worth it now than it was before. But there is kind of a changing thing about OnePlus 7 Pro and just OnePlus in general that's really scaring me and scaring a lot of other consumers as well. Now, if you want to pick this phone up, not only will I leave the OnePlus 7 Pro link down below, but also a couple other phones that I'd probably recommend throughout this year as well. You can get them from there to help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the front of the OnePlus 7 Pro, this is, in my opinion, probably the biggest change and the biggest asset for the OnePlus 7 Pro, and one of the main reasons why this phone is still being talked about in so many different videos. Every time I watch any video that's like a tech thing, this phone sometimes is mentioned. You know, I don't really hear like the Galaxy S9 being mentioned all that often, or like the iPhone XS, but this phone is always being mentioned, which is so awesome because of that panel. It had that 6.67-inch fluid AMOLED display, and there was no camera hole on it. We had that camera, pop-up camera, which I didn't like at all, but at least it had it. But it was the fact that it also had that 90 Hz refresh rate. Now, this was not the first phone ever to bring a higher refresh rate, but it was one of those phones that kind of made it popular. And I think it was the mixture of the 90 Hz refresh rate and the lack of a hole punch display that really added a lot more character to this device at the end of the day. And as I stated before, that was seriously one of the best things about the OnePlus 7 Pro, and probably the number one reason why the 7 Pro is still talked about is because of this front panel for sure. Now, you do have USB Type-C on the bottom. You don't have any expandable storage, so there's no microSD card slot or anything. You also don't have any, expandable storage, which that is also something that's kind of dumb, but it is what it is. No OnePlus device except the OnePlus X had expandable storage. But on the back, we do have a glass back on this device as well, which, as stated before, is another huge asset for it. This phone still feels like a very premium phone at the end of the day. And as I always state, that's just one of those biggest advantages for these type of devices. You don't necessarily want to have a phone that has a plastic back like the S21 or the Note 20. You want to have a phone that still has a lot of capability and just is future-proofed in any way possible. And this is one of those devices that definitely has that type of capability. Now, there's no wireless charging, no reverse wireless charging on this device either. And that really makes me choke up too, because it's just one of those things that it should have had. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But on top of that, I actually missed another super important thing on the front, and that was the embedded fingerprint sensor in the display. Now, the predecessor of this device also had the fingerprint sensor in the display, but it was just a mixture of so many different things like that that made this phone feel more like a flagship than what it was. Even though it was missing IP certification and stuff, it still felt like a pretty big flagship device in my opinion, which is awesome. So at the end of the day, the body of this phone, the panel, the features on the outside are probably one of the biggest reasons why the OnePlus 7 Pro is a timeless phone at the end of the day. And it's